Hello, welcome to Yarn Chaos, episode 4, where I will be talking all about my handmade blankets, both knit and crochet. My name is Birgitta. I am a maker from Iceland, and I would like to kick off this episode by thanking all of you just for the warm welcome into this makers community on YouTube and on Instagram, and for the very kind comments that you have left and recommendations and yeah, just everything. I was worried about the sound in my last episode, probably episodes, plural. I still am. We have really bad weather. It's February now, and again, I have blocked off the door and window that seem to complain the most when the weather is howling, and the window seems to whistle, and I've tried to block it as best as I can. We've got rain hitting the windows. Yeah, weather is just making it a little difficult to podcast with good sound quality. Now, disclaimer, I'm recording this on my phone and I don't have any kind of microphone. This is all just on an iPhone. So I don't have all the equipment and all the gadgets and all that stuff. This has to be enough for now. So I did get a recommendation though for a microphone that's called, can't remember the beginning, something Yeti Blackout. I looked it up and it looks pretty solid. It looks like it's a microphone you have on the table, which I had always thought maybe it would be better to have a clip on, but maybe a microphone on the table will pick up my voice but cancel all the other extra sounds. Still looking into it, but if you do have any good recommendations and some kind of experience with this sort of thing, what is good for a knitting podcast? What microphone would you recommend? I'm totally open for looking into that. Seeing as to how I can't get away from the sounds. The weather is what it is, and it is February in Iceland, and we just had a severe weather warning 2 days ago, and the weather prior to that and after has just been just not as severe, but still hail and rain and wind and all that. So enough about the weather. I do feel like I need to introduce myself again. I realize that not everybody has watched every episode from the beginning. Some of you are watching it backwards, and some of you are here for the first time. So you are very welcome here. Thank you for tuning in. If you're a returning viewer, I appreciate you coming back, and I hope you continue to get some creativity or ideas or just the companionship. You know, I hope you got some projects on your laps and something good to drink, and I think we'll just get started. So I have been making scrappy blankets for, oh, okay, this is so me. I'm sorry, bouncing around. I feel like I need to address one more thing. So my podcast is called Yarn Chaos, and I didn't realize this, but throughout the last couple episodes, you all have noticed an ongoing theme on my episodes, and you talk about how calming my episodes are and how my voice is soothing, which yeah, never heard that before, so this is all new to me, being on YouTube. But somebody commented, and I laughed so much when I read the comment, because it started with what an oxymoron this podcast is, and I was just like, oh, here we go. But it was actually a very kind comment, and she was just mentioning that the name of the podcast and the way I present myself are just, it's an oxymoron. And I realize that now. But the name is derived from the way I kind of live my life. So I have a tattoo that says beautiful chaos. And that is a saying that has resonated with me for many, many, many years. And when my youngest two were babies, we have 4 children. Let me just introduce myself. So I am married. We are celebrating our 20-year anniversary at the end of March of this year. We have been together for 21 years. And I'm showing my age right now. But so we have been together most of our adult life. And we have 4 children. Our oldest will be 20 this year. She is 19 now. Our second child is 18 since December, and our younger 2 are 9 and 11. So there's 18 months age gap between the older 2 and 23 months between the younger 2. And yeah, so we do things in pairs. But so when we were having our younger 2, the house was very busy. And I remember I was kind of into reading blogs at that time and stuff, and I remember coming across that saying, beautiful chaos, and it just hit me so hard in the heart. And I was just like, that's what life is to me. It is beautiful in all its messy chaoticness, and with all the good there's bad, and with all the bad there's good. And it's just a balancing, like a yin yang. And I don't know what it was, but it was something that stuck with me. So it just kind of let me see life for all the messy beautifulness that it is. So it gave me like different glasses or an outlook at life in a moment where I needed it. And it's just kind of followed me ever since. So when I decided to start the podcast, Yarn Chaos just came naturally to me because it is a soothing hobby. It is a hobby that is very meditative. I don't think that's right. Maybe it's right. But it's you get into the rhythm of knitting your stitches, and it's just a hobby that it's soothing. And in this calm and soothing hobby of mine, there's chaoticness. There's it's kind of exploded all over my home. I have yarn stashed away here and there. Some of it is display. Some of it is just up on a bookshelf on display. Others are stashed away in closets. I've got projects all over the house in project bags and baskets, and also just the chaoticness of having a lot of whips on the needles at a time. I know some people do not enjoy that. For like November and December, I tended to have just like one project on the go, and that's very out of the norm for me. I think I just needed that at that moment. But normally I've got plenty of whips on the needles, and I feel like, for me at least, it doesn't give me that much anxiety having a lot of projects on the needles. At some point I'll be like, all right, you need to hone in and start finishing some things, and then I'll like get in the gear of that. But for the most part, I enjoy having the variety. I enjoy when I need something smaller or brighter, I'll be knitting socks or hats. I like having sweaters on the go. If the sweater is very detailed and I have to think about it, then it's really nice to have a blanket that is just mindless and gives me that. So I just kind of seem to knit after my mood and time of day, and like, you know, so it is, in my mind, a little bit all over the place. So don't let my podcast deceive you. I am not always serene and calm and you know, that sort of soothing, that sort of thing. Although I appreciate you saying so. It is sometimes chaotic here and a little crazy. And anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of where my name for the podcast comes from. I have also, in this mess of trying to explain that, sort of introduced myself better. But I do feel like I need to say that people have commented that my American accent is very good, and and someone just recently said that it must have been that year that I spent in America, but that's not it. I'm born in Iceland. Both my parents are Icelandic, but my mom married an American when I was 8 years old, and I lived in the States from that time until I was 18. I went to American schools, learned American history and all that, and moved back to Iceland at 18. And funnily enough, met my husband shortly after here in Iceland. And yeah, things happened really fast for us. We got married, we had our first child together, and we moved back to the States. He was in the military, so was my stepdad, and so we moved around a lot. And that's where my American accent comes from. But we got married and had our first child in 2003, and moved back to Iceland in 2005, and we lived here for the most part. We did a test run of moving back about 8 years ago, lived there for a year, and came back. So we've been back in Iceland for about 7 years. I hope you were able to follow that. So a little bouncing around. So I felt like I needed to explain that. But getting into the episode, I've got a lot of blankets to show you, so I better get on it. Let me see. I'm thinking that I'm just gonna, let me put that here. I'm gonna just start with my oldest blankets. They are both crochet, and it was during a time where I did a lot of crocheting, primarily blankets. Also, a little disclaimer, I have this chair. It's a little noisy. So if you hear any noises, it's the chair, not me, I promise. So the first blanket I want to show you, I loved reading Lucy's blog, Ep.4, when I was really into crochet, and she has some very good tutorials, and this is one of them. I cannot remember the name of this, but I will have this in the show notes. Everything I talk about will be in the show notes. This blanket I made for my daughter when she was, my oldest daughter, when she was a preteen. I think she was about 12 when I made this. She picked out the yarn. This is, I can't remember exactly what yarn this is, but this is one of those Red Heart, or I think Red Heart instead of Lion brand. It was just the big acrylic thick yarns. I had her come with me to the store, and she picked out all of her colors, and this was her color palette at the time. She loved all the pastels, and I just had a neutral color in between. And this pattern you will see on in the show notes, and this is from Lucy from Ep.4. I loved this, making this blanket. I originally made it so wide it could fit a king size. Like, this is my arm, it's completely stretched out. It was so wide that I ended up turning the horizontal stripes vertical, and it fits perfectly on a twin size bed with a little bit of overlay. So This is the first blanket. It's very old, and I'm telling you guys, this was acrylic yarn. It's looking pretty worse for wear now. I mean, you can see all the little nuggets or whatever, but it's held through the test of time. This has gone through the wash and the dryer. I couldn't tell you how many times, and gets used a lot still. So this is the oldest blanket I currently have at, in the home right now. So I thought I'd show you that. I also have another blanket from that time. And it's kind of funny because when we did move back 7 years ago, this blanket wasn't finished, and we were just pretty much packing in suitcases. We didn't ship our things. We just put everything in suitcases and sold all our furniture and moved back 7 years ago. And this blanket had to come with me, unfinished, but I was like, oh, I have to bring my blanket. I'm gonna finish it. So this took up space in that precious space in that suitcase. And the funny thing is that until recently, it has been sitting unfinished in the closet for 7 years, which is just typical for me. But so when I decided to do a podcast about blankets, I decided to look into my my wardrobe that I have my hobby things in, and I was like, let me see, I know I've got some blankets I need to look at. Maybe I can finish some of them. And I pulled this guy out, and it was supposed to be much bigger, but I decided that finished is better than big. And I don't have any more of this yarn left, and so I had 3 squares attached here, and I ended up just frogging them and calling the blanket done. I had some extra squares, granny squares of the cream color, which I ended up frogging to use the yarn as a border along the edge. It's just a simple border. I can't remember my crochet lingo. I think this is called fastapinni in Icelandic. I cannot remember what it is in English, but it's just the tight knit, I'm not even going to try to explain it, but I just did a very tiny border around the edge. But the fun thing about this blanket is that you just do little squares and you just stack them, and collect your little squares. And as you can see, the squares aren't the same. So I had a lot of this cream, and I believe this may have been a leftover from the blanket I did for my oldest daughter. And then I bought a taupe color, and I just kind of played around with having some squares with colors, and other squares I just did them differently. So they were just a solid cream, but I just played around with having them a little different. Let me show you some of them. Some of them, some of them were just rows back and forth. But this blanket is, let me see. It is from the tip of my finger to here. So this is what, 2, 4, 6, 7 squares wide, and 2, 4, 6, 8 squares long. So it's almost a square. But it's rectangular. And when I saw this, I decided I'm finishing it. It's a baby blanket. My younger sister had a baby last August, and so my niece will be getting this blanket. It's been washed and dried, and it's ready to go. And what I loved about this is just how it's different. It's not with my other blanket, it was planned out. The colors were planned out. Everything was planned out. But I do enjoy when things just kind of get jumbled together and there's no rhyme or reason. And I just find that very soothing. I am not that person that needs things to be very precise and particular, even though I can understand the value in that, and how calming that could be for somebody else. So this is blanket number 2. I don't have a pattern for this. At the time, I just was playing around and just made every square the same size. So I don't have a pattern. This was just something that I made up. But I'm pretty sure if you take a look at Lucy's website, she's got so many patterns for blankets that I'm sure you could take some of her ideas and see some of these in there. So that is blanket number 2, and that is going to be gifted. Finally, after all these years of being a UFO in my closet, now it is going to somebody who will hopefully get a lot of use out of it. So Amelia, use it well. So that's that, and that's pretty much, and that the yarn there was also most likely Red Heart. I tend to use all sorts of yarns, so there's, even though I gravitate to other ones now, I thoroughly enjoy indie dyed yarn. I very much so enjoy like rustic woolly yarn, but this was during a time where we had a busy household and budget wasn't big, so my hobby had to, you know, match that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the good thing about acrylic yarn for blankets is that it's been through the ringer. It gets washed, dried, and all the like. So that's that. I want to talk a little bit about mitered square blankets. Or you know what? No. I'm going to talk about crochet, and then I'm done. So with the crochet bit, so then I'll just be on with the knitting. So this is the other crochet blanket that I made. So after this little era of only crocheting, I fell in love with knitting about 8 years ago. Been an avid knitter since then, and I started accumulating a lot of leftovers, as you do. And I saw someone talking about the mitered square, cozy memories blanket, scrappy blankets, and I made some of them. So this is not in a row of oldest to newest WIP by any means, but I'm just going to stay on the crochet bit. So I had been knitting for so long, and then I saw this, and somebody was making granny striped out of the leftovers, the leftover fingering weight. And I decided to jump on the bandwagon and do the same. But what I want to talk about with this blanket is that I, at the same time that I had cast this on, I don't know if you say that with crochet anymore. Cast on? Do you cast on a project? Hook up a project? So at the same time that I started this, I also learned about magic knot, and I thought how much easier it would be to just magic knot all my little nuggets and little balls of leftover yarn into one big cake. And that way, when I want to work on this, I just have a big cake and I'm not always worrying about ends, or first of all, just not having to weave in ends was my main driving goal for making a magic knot cake. But secondly, the flow of making it is so much better when you've just got a big cake of yarn and you can just hook away. So those are my two main reasons. And so that's what I did. Let me show you the blanket though. I do have some pictures in the intro showing the magic knot that I did, not how to do it. I don't feel like I'm in the place to do tutorials at the moment, but I did follow, I watched just a couple of tutorials on how to make a magic knot, and disclaimer, you have to make sure that you do them the same every single time. And this was like an evening event. I had all my little leftovers, I spread them out on my desk, and I had my ball winder or my yarn winder, and I wound up a skein that I had, and when I had just a little bit left over, I attached it to the next yarn I was going to use. And as I'm making the magic knot, I'm like very careful as to where it matters if you're going behind or front, and how you tug the knot together. So just if you're gonna do this, it's held up. I have no holes. It's held up all these years. It's been through the wash plenty of times. So it has worked, but I want to make sure to like make it come across to be careful when you're doing it. Make sure you do it correctly every single time. It was a whole evening event, and I was saying in my head, like over, under, loop, tighten, just every single time I made the knot to make sure that every knot was secure. But the great thing about it is that even the tiniest little bit, like you've made the sock, you've put some of the leftovers into your mitered square blanket, and you still have some left over. So even the little nuggets I would put into this magic knot or magic knot cake. So this eats up leftovers, like all of it, the little bits, the big bits, any of it. Color wise, it's all over the place. Let me just show you from the start. I do recommend that if you're, and I'm speaking from my own mistakes, when you chain for the, in the beginning, when you chain it up, I just kind of did the width I wanted. I have no idea how many stitches this is, but this pattern is also on Lucy's blog under Granny Striped blanket, but I would recommend using a larger hook than you're going to use for the rest of the blanket when you chain and when you do the first row, maybe even the first row or two, and then size down your hook and continue on, because then it'll be straight on the edge. And as you can see, mine's kind of cinched in because I used the same hook for the whole thing. So it's tighter at the bottom where I started as opposed to when I cast off. So, but this is it. This is the colors. I'm gonna try to pull it up so you can see them all. This is, yeah. So it's like a perfect lap size. I haven't measured it, but it has just all kinds of colors in here. And the thing is, for a little while, leftover blankets, I was like, it's like my mind tried to make it like aesthetically pleasing and like, but then I just kind of gave into it because it's never gonna have the color palette unless you're planning your blanket precisely, which I've seen blankets like that and they look beautiful. But the point of this blanket was to eat up my leftovers, and I don't only knit for myself. I knit for my kids, I knit for the people around me, and their color palette and preference on color is so different from mine. So if I was making a scrappy leftover blanket only using leftovers from my personal projects that I put on my body, I know I have a specific color palette. I like earthy tones. I like greens and peachy pinks and purples and yellows and oranges and rust and that sort of thing. So I'm very fall when it comes to colors. So that's what my blanket would look like, but I don't knit a lot of blue for myself. I appreciate the color. I just don't for some reason. And I don't do a lot of like neons unless it's on socks. So, I mean, these colors are like from my kids' stuff, and their favorite colors are different from mine. My daughter was super into bright colors and like rainbow colors and all the colors and glitter and all that stuff. And my, son prefers these tones here. So it's a mishmash of all of our leftovers. And that's kind of what I think is charming about scrappy blankets. It's the, I don't know if I can say ugly cute, or I don't know. But it's just the mismatch. This is what I find very charming. There is no, it just kind of all meshes together. But this project I absolutely recommend. I was crocheting on this when I had been knitting for a couple of years, and I had not really been crocheting at the time, and I just found the change in movements of my hands, you know, from going from knitting to just crochet. It's a different movement, and it was a nice change to have along with my other knitting projects. So if you do both, yeah, it's very nice. I don't know what to say about that. But if you know how to crochet and knit, it's nice to have a project that pulls you kind of away from your main thing. So this was the granny stripe blanket. You can find this recipe or this pattern on Lucy's blog, Ep.4. Now we're getting into the mitered square. So, sorry, when I'm moving around, this chair does make some noises. So I made 3 mitered, I've made 3 mitered square blankets. The first one I don't have with me. It wasn't very large. This is just basically just covers your lap, and that's it. So this is what it looks like. I did notice that I have a stain on it here somewhere. Yeah, something has spilled on it. But sorry. But the first blanket was maybe half this size. It was about like this size. And that blanket, I just kind of lost steam on it. And it was my first mitered square, and the color scheme was kind of messing with me. And I was like, oh, this is just not working. I don't really want to knit on this anymore. And so it became a doll blanket, and my daughter used it for many, many years. And I decided to cast on a new one, and I was like, oh, this blanket's going to be so pleasing to the eye, and I'm going to plan out the colors better, and it's going to look so much better. So I started another one with the same stitch count. This is 40 stitches, just like my first one. And I lost steam on it as well. So that's why it's just a lap blanket. Most of the time it just sits on this chair. Because again, the color combination was messing with me. This was before I did the granny stripe and before I just gave in to the mishmash of colors. So when I was making this, I was like, oh, it's just looking like the other one. I don't know what, you know, the color palette was just messing with me. And after this blanket, I was just like, this is what it's going to look like. This is what scrappy blankets look like when you are not planning out the colors, and that's okay. And in here is like, there's so many, you know, it's called Cozy Memories for a reason. Like I remember these socks, the orange stripy socks here, these for my son. There's just so much in here that I still remember. Like this here, my mom knit my son socks out of this yarn, and it looks like tiger stripes when it's knit in the round. So that was really cool. My daughter had these and you know, socks in these here colors. But what's also cool about it is that I have in here where I had actually, I hand dyed my own skeins. I had bought bare yarn a few years ago and was playing around with natural dyes, and I had onion skin and avocado pits and avocado skin, and some sort of a bean I was also using, but I was just playing around. So this is, I believe this is from when I was hand dyeing my own yarn. And I got a lot of like muted, beautiful colors like grays, peaches, and like creams, like camel creams, and beautiful colors. But so that's pretty special. Like you know, I can remember all that. It's in here, and I remember it, even though it looks a little chaotic and all over the place. But I did lose steam on this blanket, and I was like, I should make a third Cozy Memories blanket, but this time I'll make the stitch count higher. So I did that, and my stitch count there became 61 stitches. So this is an even amount because of how the, I don't know if you can see how it comes together. You just knit 2 together, I think to the left, and then knit 2 together to the right. And then you get this center, and this is the pattern that you'll find on Ravelry Cozy Memories blanket. But I decided to cast on the third mitered square blanket or Cozy Memories blanket, but I had seen my mom was making one, and she carried the middle stitch, so it's an odd number, so the middle stitch is carried flat all throughout and everything else is garter. So when you're knitting back, you purl the middle stitch to keep it flat. So I'll show you that. But this blanket stuck, and it's a behemoth of a blanket. It is massive. And as I say that, I'm also going to tell you that it's for a twin size bed. But when you're knitting little squares, that's a massive blanket in my mind. It definitely hangs over the edge. This is it right here. It's huge. I've got this yarn attached to it because I did start an I-cord border around it, and this yarn, I can't pronounce it, but this is it. I bought it at a yarn store in Akureyri, and it actually comes with like extra yarn here. And I remember my mom being here visiting, and I was looking at this, and she was like, you need to start the border, like, you know, get going on the border. Let's see how it comes out. And so I pulled out the yarn I had bought to have and this is like highlighter yellow. And I saw this and I was like, huh, what is this? Like, I wonder what this is for. And she's like, oh, that's to strengthen the heel. So that's pretty nifty. I thought that was pretty cool. I won't be using it though, because I'm using it for the border. But I think this is very interesting and very, what's the word? Usable? I don't know, but pretty cool. But anyway, I'm using my Knit Pro Carbons, 2.5 millimeters on the border, and I cast on 5 stitches for the border. So let me find it. This is what it looks like. I just started here, cast on 5 stitches, and worked the border. Here is the corner, which I thought was pretty decent, and I'm up to this point, but I took the needles out and I'm gonna unravel the border. I'm doing something wrong. I'm not picking up the last stitch that's closest to the square correctly so you can see it. I'm gonna turn it around and show you. So like this is the front and it's pretty solid, but as you get to here, you can see there's like a line, and the last stitch is right here, and I'm just not picking it up correctly because there's just this dark line running all the way through, and here I made some kind of a, I don't know, picked it up wrong there. So, and that's pretty close to the beginning, but I'm doing something wrong. And I didn't look up a tutorial. I just recently finished an I-cord on the collar of my love note and on the cuff. And so I just kind of picked up a stitch, made 5 stitches out of it, and just started just to see what it would look like. And I also wanted to turn the corner to see how that would be, but I can see I definitely need to look up a tutorial because this is, I want it neater. This is not what I wanted. So somebody mentioned in the comments, they asked if I would do a tutorial for I-cord. Obviously, I'm not that person that you want making a tutorial. I'm just kind of getting into this whole podcasting thing, and I don't have all the equipment for that sort of stuff. And there's just so many great tutorials out there on YouTube. So I'm just going to recommend to look up tutorials that are already out there. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to look up and watch a couple of them to see how they're done. Maybe there's different methods, and hopefully I'll be able to see what I'm doing wrong. But I think it's going to look so good with this. I feel like I'm sorry. So I feel like I'm channeling Stephen West when I do this. I made a shawl from him, Vertices United, and I did a bright yellow border on that as well, and I just love it. So definitely channeling Stephen West with this border. But I think just with all the scrappiness, I need the border to pop. I need the border to stand out and not like blend in with some of the squares that are on the edge. So I think this is a good thing. I haven't podcasted in a while. My whole household has been sick, and my youngest was out of school for almost a week, and my next youngest was out for a week and a half. My teenagers have had this flu that's going around, and my husband and I got it as well. And I lost my voice last week for a few days, so it's still a little scratchy. So if I'm clearing my throat, that's why. But everybody's healthy now, and hopefully it stays that way. So anyway, on with the blanket. Now that I have talked about the border, I would want to show you how the stitch is different. So from the mitered square, this one I tried looking for a pattern and I just couldn't find one. So if you know of a pattern, please put it in the comments. This was just something that, an idea I got from my mom. She said she carried it just like when you do the raglan here. So I don't know if you can see how this stitch in the middle is just flat and everything around it is garter. So you knit the stitch on the right side, and when you're on the wrong side and you're knitting, you purl the stitch. So every other row you're purling it, and that's how you get this crisp diagonal line here. And I loved how this looked. So I remember casting on, I was so excited. I was like, this is the blanket, this is gonna be it. But I have a little story. So around the time I cast this on, I had gotten an opal advent calendar from Litla Prjónabúðin, that's in Reykjavik. It's a little store in Reykjavik. The little knitting store is what it's directly translated as. But you can see the opal. If you've knit with opal, you can recognize it. It's these colors here. And I started this blanket because I got the advent, and I was like, I'm gonna make 61 stitches. This is gonna be the blanket I stick with. And I started right here, and all my lines go in this direction. And I did opened one little opal mini a day and knit it into this blanket. But then when I got most of it on, I didn't like how it looked. So I think after adding other colors around the opal, I was like, oh, why didn't I spread it out? Again, this wasn't very as dramatic as I'm making it out to be. I just remember thinking this, like, I wish I had spread out the opal more, because now it's just so saturated with opal right here, and it's just gonna be so pronounced or obvious when I lay it out flat. I have since then had a talk with myself and told myself that this is such a small part of the blanket. There's so much more of the blanket, and that instead of being irritated that it's so saturated in that one area with opal as opposed to the other, I'm just gonna be like, oh, good reminder of the year. I got an opal advent calendar. Anyway, okay, so yeah, so this is the middle, and you can see the middle is right here, and it makes an X, and this goes up, the one below it goes down, and so forth. And what I decided is that I'm gonna have this be the center, and I'm gonna work all these lines in this direction, and then down. And that was just kind of a good base to work on, and that way I could kind of figure out how wide I wanted it and how long it was going to be. And this blanket fits on a twin size, and it has so many beautiful, beautiful little mini skeins. And some of them are, where was it? Some of them I actually finished the mini skein before I was able to finish the mitered square. And in those instances, I just picked up another leftover, like here, and added that here. So, yeah. And this colorway here, this is from So Sweet Violet. No, I always say that. Sweet Sparrow Yarn. Julie from Sweet Sparrow Yarn. I got an advent calendar for her from her the one year, and bought some skeins from her. This is called The Secret Garden, which is just like a green with like a peachy pink color. Love this colorway. Red Christmassy color. And I don't know if you can see this. I also wanted to mention one more thing with this, and then I don't need to show you every single square, but do you see this line here? This is purposely done, just like here. Where I started with the opal, I wasn't knitting in my ends as I attached new squares, which I started doing then at some point. And so the one corner of the blanket has a ton of ends just hanging off of it that I've yet to weave in. But at some point I realized that I was not going to want to weave in all these ends, and I needed to do something else. And this needs to be, the process of knitting needs to be very easy for me. It needs to be like, especially like this sort of stuff. This is the stuff you grab just for soothing knitting, right? Like just knitting that is soothing. And so I didn't want all the ends. And so I just, when I was attaching the green one, I would pick up the red yarn that was hanging off from this square, and I would just knit it in with the green one. So everywhere I attached, you'll see like a marled effect like that right there. Sometimes you can't see it if the yarns are very similar, but what that means is that I don't have any ends on that side. So it looks pretty much the same, aside from that it's the wrong side. Whereas where the opal is, I've got a ton of ends to weave in, which I'll get done. It's just not my favorite. And oh, I need to speak on one more thing. So here you can see I added in when this finished, but this square is here. So if I had a lot, oh, I can like see little hairs flying in the air. Did I mention we have dogs? There's dog hair on here. So this colorway is so neon speckled, and I love it so much. And when I see it, I just can't help but smile, because when I saw the name for this, aside from just how awesome it looks, it's called 90s Snowsuit. Like, how cool is that? And she's no longer dyeing. Her name is Herbstblatt Regina. That was her yarn dyeing company, and she was based out of Germany. Oh, I wish I could buy more of this. I saw this yarn and I was like, I'm making socks. So I usually wear like not muted, but like earthy tone colors, like fall colors. But for socks, there is no rules. And I loved these socks. And I used every bit of it. I did this one, and then I put it here and absolutely finished it and added in some leftovers here. So this is a massive blanket that I'm never going to be able to show you completely. I love it very much. This is like another tiger striped sock that my mom made for my son. But this is absolute leftovers. This was a Christmas sock. These socks are Tweety, and I love these socks. They knit up so nicely. But this is just a mismatch from all kinds of projects, and I love them. So I think I'm just gonna toss it here over on the couch. But so this one's stuck and I'm almost finished, and you'll see this in future episodes because I'm gonna figure out how to do the I-cord edge, and you'll see it, and hopefully I will be able to finish this in the next couple of weeks, hopefully sooner. I have 2 more blankets to show you. I realize this is running kind of long, but this next one that I have to show you is also a mitered square, but it's a little bit different. I actually pulled it out of my cabinet that I keep all my hobby things in, and I actually store it in, this is just a bed sheet cover that I thought would be really good for storing projects. As you can see, it's clear, you can see it, but this blanket, hold on, let me open it. Okay, so this blanket is a 9 patch, which is a terminology from sewing if you do quilting, and I've done some 9 patch quilts, which are just very beginner friendly and right up my alley. And I thought, how cool would it be to like be a little more particular on what colors I'm putting on here, and this blanket is absolutely just something that is for me and my color palette and the colors I enjoy, and they're all very kind of muted and just colors that I enjoy. So in this blanket, I'm not putting in anything that I don't thoroughly enjoy. So and then I saw that oh, I'm blanking on her name, but from the Bakery Bears, she did a blanket like this, and what I haven't done is attach them all together. So I've got quite a few of them here. I'm going to show you each one of them. Bunch of ends to sew in, or to weave in, but I saw after I had started that I was like, how am I going to attach these together? Like, I've got to kind of try to figure that out. I understand the concept of attaching squares when you're crocheting because I know how to crochet them onto each other, but I was like, how am I going to knit? Am I going to have to like whip stitch these, or what is that method when you do the toes and you sew them in? Like I wasn't sure how I was going to attach them, but I saw that I want to say Bryony, but I know that's her daughter's name. I cannot remember her name, but from the Bakery Bears, she has done these sorts of, or this type of blanket. And these are all like, you know, this is actually a very dark green color. I don't know if you can see that, and browns, and so this is one. This is another. And this one's very light colored, very like, I don't know, I think of Easter when I see this. Okay, as I'm seeing this, I'm recognizing some of the names. This is from Lolo Did It, Hippo for St. Patrick's Day, which I just love that name. This was my very first one. Oh, hold on. Okay, sorry, my son just came in. So I was showing you this square. This is the very first one I made that looks like this. Or that looks like this. This is the very first one I made as a 9 patch. And I believe this is also Lolo did it. It's a gray base with all kinds of speckles. I believe this is one I hand dyed, and this one as well. So I think this is the avocado, and this is the onion skin, I think. Here's another one. And another one. And with this one, I also have that middle stitch always knit flat, and they're all going the same direction. And then I just have to be careful. Look at how cute this is. This is just a white base with speckles, and this too. My daughter had one of those, they're like little elf hats where you could just, it's like a collar here, they poke their face through and then it stands up in the back. My mom knit her one when she was just little and in play school. So there's all these memories in it. Also my favorite one from Julie from Sweet Sparrow, Secret Garden colorway, which I hope she's still dyeing. So this is another one. And here I didn't have enough, so I just finished it off with this one. And it's, yeah, it is what it is. This one was a little Halloween-y. I think I was channeling some Halloween vibes there. And this is the last one. So none of them have been blocked. I've got a bunch of ends to sew in. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 of them. I'm gonna do 2 more squares, lay them out, and see how the size of it is, and if I need to make any more, or if that's gonna be it. But I'm definitely gonna have to check out Bakery Bear's patterns to see if there's, I'm pretty sure there's a pattern for attaching blankets like this. And this is so easy to travel with. I had them at work and was working on them because it's just, this is it. It fits in a small project bag, and yeah, it was nice to work with. And this is so satisfying. You're just putting little colors, playing with, you have a bunch of little balls in your project bags and bag, and you're just playing with color, basically. So this is going to be, once I finish my mitered square, the border on my mitered square, I'm going to pick this blanket up and start working on this year and try to finish it. So that's it for the mitered square. I have one more blanket to show you, and then we're done. So this is the Habitation throw by Helen Stewart, and it is held with fingering weight yarns, all kinds of leftovers, and mohair. And I started on this end here. Let me see. And I can see I've got some stitches that have been pulled. I need to cinch them in. But I started on this end, and you increase on each side, and you make just a big, you know, like shawl, and then you decrease. But she has you do like eyelets every once in a while, so it's a soothing pattern. You are quick to grasp how to increase and when you're supposed to put the eyelets in, which is absolutely not perfect. Sometimes I did a little more garter than I was supposed to, and then I just added a eyelet section. Like I've mentioned before, I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to my knitting. It's just supposed to be enjoyable. And so I started here, and I bought a couple of mohair balls. I think it was like a light, like a very light purple maybe. And I just held it, or like a peachy purple, and I held it double with my leftovers. And this is what it looked like in the beginning. And all the way until I got to here, and then I started decreasing, and I'm using the mohair that I had bought still in all these colors. But then I run out of mohair, and I wanted to continue working on this, and it's a scrappy blanket. So I went and looked in my stash, and I found like a thicker, it's probably a DK weight mohair. I can't remember the name, but it was a white. And so this bit right here is a little thicker than the rest of it, but it doesn't bother me. It is a scrappy blanket, and I wanted to use what I have. And so I put this in there. And then when I ran out of that, I had a darker, like maroon mohair that I added to my leftovers, my leftovers. And then I found another skein of the white, added that to it, and some more of the dark maroon. And I think at this point, I think the mohair ended here. I ran out of mohair out of my stash, didn't want to buy any more skeins, and this little bit right here has no mohair. But it was a great stash buster. I got a lot of mini skeins done. I started this blanket in the summer of 2020. Things had opened up here in Iceland a little bit, and we were able to go camping. There were very strict rules, but we were able to go. It had opened up a little bit, and we were allowed to go camping, but there was like distance and rules we had to follow. But it was nice. So I attached this to being able to, travel a little bit around my country and go camping and still be safe. And so this has a lot of summer memories, and I finished it in that following winter. But Habitation Throw by Helen Stewart, I almost feel like I'll make this again. If I get another Advent at some point, I think this would be a fun project to work on with Advent. Okay, so, and this, like, I am so obsessed with adding mohair to things now. Like, so obsessed. So I just love the fabric that it gives. But that is that. I want to mention one thing before I sign off. So that was my blankets, and I hope you enjoyed seeing the blankets that I have in the house, the older ones and the newer ones. But before I sign off, I want to mention I signed up for a test knit, and her name is Aleksandra or Aleksandra. I'll put her information in the show notes, but she had put on a test call for the Weronika sweater, Weronika with a W, and I applied for it, and I was accepted as a test knitter. And here are my yarns. I'm keeping it in this beautiful little basket that I got from Molly of a Homespun House a few years ago. I don't know if you've picked up on this, but I don't really follow patterns from the beginning to the end. I rarely swatch, and I'm very much a free spirit when it comes to this hobby of mine. But this is like my year of getting out of my comfort zone and doing things that challenge me a little bit. And so I've applied for test knits before, but they were little like fingerless mitts. But I've never applied for a sweater, and no, I have. I'm lying. I've done a Christmas sweater before, but it's challenging for me because I have to follow it precisely from the beginning to the end. I can't just veer off and do my own thing. I have to do exactly as the instructions say. So I was very good. I did test swatches. I had to do 3 before I met Gage. But I just want to talk about them real quick because I knotted them. So this one is my first one, and I'm using an Icelandic yarn dyer. Her company name is Mal, and there was a yarn crawl a couple years ago in Bluntos that I went to, and I bought a sweater's quantity in this color, and it's like an orangey red. It's called Melona, which is melon, and I was gonna buy the mohair just at a later date that matches this from her, but I never ended up doing that. So I went to my local yarn store when I was accepted for the test knit, and I bought this kid silk mohair. The colorway is 32, and so I'm holding these together. And sorry, my chair's squeaky. So I did the first swatch, and the swatch is supposed to be 20 stitches over and 27 rows, and I just did a little garter around so it would lay flat. But what I wanted to show you is that I saw this somewhere a couple years ago where I'm not very good about writing things down. When I'm knitting, I just quick and easy is my thing. So I knotted 4 knots because I was using 4.5, and because it's double, I put a knot on the one and not the other. So knotting just the one is in my head like 0.5, and so when I see this swatch, I'll know I used 4.5 millimeters millimeter needles. But it has this like beautiful halo, and I did this a couple days ago. Did meet gauge with 4.5. I did another one where I used 3.5 because I don't know why I went down 2 sizes, but I did. And I like the fabric. It's more dense, but I did meet gauge, and I also did 3 knots and then 1 knot on the one strand of yarn to symbolize 0.5. Did meet gauge, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna 4.5 didn't work, 3.5 didn't work. I need to find my 4 millimeter needles, and if that doesn't work, I didn't know what I was going to do because I'm not accustomed to swatching, and if the 4 millimeter one wouldn't work, I didn't know what to do. So thank goodness it did work, and you know, trust the swatch, I guess. So this is it, and I put 4 knots here so I wouldn't forget. And this is a little more lofty, but still pretty dense. And I think this is gonna be so beautiful. And at the end of this episode, I've attached some pictures of the swatch and the yarn, but also of the finished sweater that the designer made. Her Instagram handle is Vert and Rose, or Vert and Roses. But I'll have some pictures of the sweater at the end. So sorry, voice. So I swatched this a couple days ago, and I've just been sitting on these because we are getting the pattern today, and today is the 10th of February, and I am so excited to knit this. It is a beautiful sweater. It has this cable detail here at the cuff, held with mohair, which, you know, is just sweet spot. And then it has I-cord strands right here that you tie in a bow, and it's meant to be worn in the front, but you can turn it around. I think the neck would just be a little bit higher. I think it depends how tight you tie the bow, but the bow can also be worn in the back. So versatile for the win. So this has been sitting and just waiting, and now I can check my email, get the pattern, and cast on, and I'm so excited. And we get 6 weeks to finish it, which I think is enough time, I think, to finish it. And I'm really excited. So stay tuned. I'm allowed to show my progress on this sweater, so stay tuned. In the next episodes, I will show you what it looks like as I work on it. I've also cast on another sweater since I last podcast, called the Tulip Sweater by Bee Mandarins, and I have left over from my other wool sweater. I had some leftover yellow, and I found more yellow in my stash of Plötelope, and so this is held single a single strand of plötulope with mohair, kid silk mohair, and it's a little bit darker than the yellow wool, but it's knitting up like this. And it smells so sheepy and it smells so good. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just loving the wool. I've attached some little stitch markers because I think I am pretty sure, if I did my measurements right, that I'm at where I start doing the tulip pattern at the bottom. And I think this is just gonna look beautiful. And you know, considering how the weather's been, this might be my Easter sweater. You know, name and the color, it just fits. So stay tuned with that. I'm sorry this was kind of long-winded. It's a pretty long episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And just again, 1,000 thank yous for the comments and the recommendations and all the things. Everything I talked about will be in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram as Yarn Chaos. I have an older Instagram handle called Handmade and Off-Centered. All this will be listed below. I'm also on Ravelry, but I'm not active on Ravelry. But Instagram, we can like chit chat over there and that sort of thing. But thank you so much. Until next time.